questions within the chat. So don't worry, if you have questions, we will come back to that later. Bu Anita, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rene Verboeg, for introducing the session. Goedemorgen. Good afternoon to all participants in the Netherlands, and selamat sore. I mean, good morning in the Netherlands and good afternoon in Indonesia. First of all, I would like to say welcome and thank you for having the session with us. Hopefully, this session we will have an interesting discussion and come to an end with an insight and more values to the topic. So in this session, we will talk about the landscape restoration in Kalimantan. Allow me to share the screen first. Okay. Okay. Could you see the screen? Yeah. Okay, we will start the short presentation actually. Okay, I will start from the beginning. Yeah, the session actually is related to sustainable development goals, which is related to climate change and sustainable development. And Rene has mentioned about the title of the topic. It's the role of forest and agricultural landscape restoration to support urban health and living condition. What behind the session is actually the plan, or we could say the plan for the government to have the new capital city in Indonesia. Yeah, the government has mentioned about six elements or components. Why do we need to have a new capital? So the first is population, the economic contribution, water crisis, land conversion and urbanization, and also the environment and economic. Yeah, so there are six components that being considered to the government, why we have to move to the new area for the capital city. As we know, Java has the highest population, so about more than 50% of the population of Indonesia is in Java. Uh, as we know, we are in Indonesia. We have a large areas, but the population, half of the population is in just one island. Also, it's related to economic contribution, and then the problem in water. Of course, also the conversion of land is highest in Java comparing to the other area. And related to the urbanization, where the largest population is in Jakarta and in nearest cities like Bogor, Depok, Tangerang, Bekasi, and Cianjur in West Java. And the government also mentioned about the problem in carrying capacity of the environment and economic to those other components. There are some criteria in determining the location of the new capital mentioned also by the government. Um, there are strategic location, land availability, low risk disaster, water availability, investment efficiency, and low social conflict. So from this statement, actually, we know what is the criteria from the government for the new location of the capital city. And of course, in Indonesia, we have known that the government has decided to have the capital in East Kalimantan. So it will be between two regencies, North Penajam Pasir and Kutai Kartanegara. And of course, as the activities of building a new capital, we believe that will going to be the land opening or clearing, infrastructure construction, and there will be the administration and policy implementation due to the two regencies to be the new capital. The government also has mentioned about the plan to have the 180,000 hectares for the new capital, with the main areas of 50,000 hectares. It is comparing to Jakarta, which just has 66,000 hectares. So it's about three times bigger than Jakarta. So we could imagine this large area going to be the center of the capital city with, of course, we could imagine also the landscape of Kalimantan with, for example, there are a big area of forests. So in this session, we are going to more deep to the issue of land cover and land use and the environmental and climatic risks. The first is on land cover and land use will be presented, the discussion with Dr. Karina van der Laan, and the environmental climatic risks to be presented by Dr. Lailan Sofina. So as we know, in East Kalimantan, we have forest areas, agriculture areas, ex-plantation forests, ex-mining, oil palm plantation and also we try to discuss about the existing and potential condition. So there will be forest degradation and deforestation also because of the new settlements or and also the opening of the area for the administration areas. And for the environmental and climatic risks, Dr. Lailan will discuss about the climate change, forest status and condition. We will talk about the peatland, mangroves, forests and land fires, forest and land fires, and urban health risks. I think we do agree that in building a new capital in the new area will be more challenges and also opportunities for us Indonesian. But we do hope that the building of the new capital will still can have the harmony between the city and the nature, and of course in the landscape of East Kalimantan. Okay, I think that's all for me for introducing the session. I will get back to you, Renee. Thank you.
Bonita, thank you very much. There are no questions yet, so I would like to give the digital floor to Bu Lailan for her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Rene. Please allow me to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lailan from Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. Today, I'd like to share with you about the importance of forest and peatland for East Kalimantan and degradation implication. The scope of the talks would be the values of forest and peatland, the implication of degradation, and consideration needs. As we all know that East Kalimantan has about 12.6 million hectares of forest area, or around 63% of the total area. The forest area has ecological as well as economical value. As for example, the Tahura Bukit Suharto, which is located in Kutai Kartanegara and Penajam Pasir Utara, the proposed location for a new capital of Indonesia, has important ecological value of forest ecosystem, like mixed dipterocarp forest, lowland heath forest, and beech forest. And also wildlife such as orangutan, honey bear, clouded leopard, and other wildlife. The forest area has also been designated to orangutan center, education forest, and ecotourism. However, the forest area is now under threats of forest encroachment, forest fire, illegal logging, illegal mining, illegal wildlife trade, and shifting cultivation. The study of Julian et al. Shows a large economical value of Tahura Bukit Suharto, which is about 25.1 billion US dollar in total, which include direct use value of wood and non-wood forest products, indirect use value and option value of clean air, flood control, ecotourism, option for forest establishment, and biodiversity conservation. And degradation values of the forest disturbances of forest fire, illegal logging, and erosion is about 100 million US dollar. East Kalimantan has also a peatland area of about 161,000 hectares, or around 1.2% of the total area, with 10.6 million tons of carbon storage. The peatland has very important function of the hydrological balance, carbon stock and sequestration, biodiversity, livelihood, and ecotourism. The largest peatland area is found in Kutai Kartanegara, about 122,000 hectares. And now the peatland area is also under threat of drainage for development, fire, and subsidence. As we all aware that East Kalimantan has a long forest fire history. In 1982-1983, fire burned about 3.5 million hectares of tropical forest as the first large fire ever recorded in the 20th century. And the fire has been recurred in 1997-1998, which burned about 5.2 million hectares, and again in 2015 and 2019. The impacts of the fire is not only to the forest ecosystem, but also to the environment, such as climate change, of course, global warming, and also to the air quality and human health and activities. As shown in the right above figure, that the peat combustion from peatland in Indonesia contributed about 45% of the particulate matter 2.5 of fire emission, and greater of 68% in 2015. Therefore, in development of the new capital, there are some consideration needs, such as first, that high value of forest and peatland in East Kalimantan need to be managed sustainably. Second, high forest and land fire risk in East Kalimantan is important threat on development. And the last, mismanagement of forest and peatland may lead to the environmental disaster and social disruption. With this, I would like to end my presentation, and thank you very much for your kind attention. So I'll give you to Dr. Rene, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bu Lailan. There is one question addressed actually to all of us, although the question was addressed to Bu Anita from RAI. The question was how we as researchers can contribute in balancing the possibility of more land conversion in the future in Kalimantan with the restoration activity ongoing. And this is exactly what we want to address during our discussion. So I would keep that question in mind. And let's see after the presentation of Karina how we can address this issue. So thank you for asking this question. The final presentation by Dr. Karina van der Laan. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, everyone. My presentation or my focus will be on the expected impact of the new capital. 1 second. Yes, here it goes. What I think is the biggest concern of the development is the flow of migration. And I think Shimamura and Mizunoya have illustrated this very well. On the left side, you see the immigration flow from Jakarta to the new proposed capital. And especially employees in the public sector and their families, but also employees in the construction sector will move to Balikpapan and the surrounding area. This will also lead to further economic development and also increased immigration by spontaneous immigration. The biggest concern or the biggest challenge will be that still a large part of the land is covered with forest and also peatlands. 65% of the land is still forested. And more than half of the land in the district are allocated for oil palm logging, pulp and paper and mining concessions. On the right side, you see the map with overlapping concessions for the one I mentioned. And on the left side, you see in blue, the key biodiversity areas. And I surrounded particularly the new capital, where you also see key biodiversity areas. Well, what are the expected ecological impacts? An increased immigration will lead to increased air, soil, water pollution, but also to increase food production, which in turn will lead to displacement of oil palm, timber, pulp, paper, and mining concessions. This means that these companies will seek for other land, either in this district or in the surrounding districts. There's also an increased need for housing, and of course there will also be an increased economic development. And as a result, we expect an increased forest loss and peatland conversion, which is already a challenge in this area. This will also increase the fire risk, as was also indicated by Bu Lailan, increase carbon emissions and increase biodiversity losses. And this is under a business as usual scenario. So of course there are options to mitigate this. Well, how can we mitigate these negative impacts? I made a short list also for us to start the discussion, but I will highlight a few. The first one is what we think is very important is that the government first focuses on the restoration of degraded forests, peatlands, and open mining pits. This to minimize emissions, but also to compensate for future emissions. The second one is the mitigation of fire risk by reforestation and peatland rewetting. Many peatlands are already drained by various companies and also allowed by the government. And these peatland areas need to be, or the drainage canals should be closed and the peatlands should be rewetted because the compensation of emissions has to take place. For this, it's very important to start collaboration with NGOs and also green restoration or reforestation companies. The third point is tackling of corruption and reform of election processes. What you see now in many areas in Indonesia is that corruption or the elections often are related to corruption in such a way that land development companies like oil palm or timber companies pay for election, how do you say that? I cannot find the word, but during the election. What is also important is that spatial planning needs to be improved. And this also entails sustainable intensification of existing food farms, which are often developed by small-scale smallholder farmers. And this includes best management practices, but also the increase of yields and decreasing losses. And in such a way, you can minimize the amount of land that is needed for production of food. And the last one is responsible planning of concessions. So if concessions have to be relocated or if new permits are being handed out to companies, it should be planned in such a way that it's not at the cost of forests and peatlands. Well, I think that this is the input for the discussion as well. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carina. No pressing questions have been raised in the chat function, although we are with a few, so I think we should handle questions very well. We will start with our online discussion. So I would say Pita and Pakbarano start with the introduction of this discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I will share my screen. Okay. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you, depending on where you are located. I will start off chairing the discussion, and I will do this together with Barano Silistiawan from WWF. And previous to this session, we also did a survey. And altogether, 24 participants did respond to this survey using SurveyMonkey. And we will present briefly the results of this survey. And during this session, we will also use Mentimeter. And to make you more familiar with this tool, which is excellent for having interaction, we will start off with a first question.
Okay, I need to share then my screen. Wait a minute. Present. Oh. So, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so go to menti.com using your web browser.
En de code nog even noemen.
Yeah, and of course, first you need to type in the code. There it comes.
Ik denk dat jij dat beter even kunt samenvatten.
Well, we are with about 24 participants, so not all of you have already filled this in. But it becomes clear that most of us are from academia. We have one from, one policymaker, one from NGO, one from business, and one from another type of profession. I will just wait a few minutes. Okay, so most of us are academia. I will stop sharing now, and we go further with the discussion.
Okay, so that gave us already an impression of the composition of the audience that is participating in today's discussion. And here on this slide, we have summarized the results of some of the questions asked in the SurveyMonkey survey. So the question was, do you think the new capital will lead to further deforestation? That was the first question. And we see that the majority of the respondents said, yes, that is very likely. Whereas a few persons disagreed and some people were more neutral. And can forest planting prevent haze and smoke? The majority said yes, that is possible. So it is seen as an important mitigation measure for health impacts due to haze and smoke. But some of the participants were more neutral or did agree somewhat less strongly. And another question was, will the new capital create also opportunities for reforestation? And here we see that the opinions varied a lot. So you see that some people fully agreed, while others strongly disagreed, and some others are in between. So what we can conclude from this question is that people, well, first of all, disagreed, but also that there is a lot of uncertainty involved. We do not actually know what the future will bring. And from the earlier presentations, it became very clear that forest restoration is very important. And today's session will also focus on this question. If we consider it important, what is then needed to bring about forest restoration? So from the survey, we also analyzed what the principal environmental challenges are for the region. And we see that in dark green and green, loss of forests and conservation, and loss of ecosystem functions are considered most important. Some people highlighted the protection of remaining forests and degraded lands, whereas some minor issues are indicated as well in the list. So the concerns are quite clear from this slide as a result of the survey. So the results indicate that there is potential for further deforestation as a result of the establishment of capital, that forest loss will continue and will be aggravated, and that will affect conservation areas and it will lead to loss of ecosystem functions. So what could be done to mitigate further deforestation? And what type of knowledge is needed? Do we need spatial modeling to predict land cover change? Do we need certain planning instruments? So I'd like to open the floor for these first questions now and see what your thoughts are regarding the things that need to be done and the type of research that is needed to answer this first question.
don't see any, let me see, Jan Steverink has a question. Let me see if I can unmute him. Does that work?
It was not really a
Yeah.
question, it was more like a remark.
Okay.
If a project like this is undertaken, it's vast, it's very ambitious. When I heard it for the first time, I really couldn't believe it, that this was a realistic idea. But I think if you are going to do it, make sure that it is the best and the most sustainable and the most environment friendly capital city in the world. That's the only way to make it a success, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And do you have some thoughts on the first question related to the survey results as well?
No, not really. But I think all of them should be addressed at maximum effort. And then you will have to look at the area and designate areas for reforestation, etc., etc. But my statement is just that we should put maximum effort to make it as sustainable as possible, and not just try to let's say, to mitigate some of the damage, because then in the end, nobody will really be satisfied.
Yes, indeed. So balancing the development of the new capital city with all kind of other developments in the broader landscape is really at stake. And is there someone who would like to add something to the suggestions that are put here on the screen? So the suggestion would be to focus on spatial modeling to predict land use change, maybe the development of new spatial planning instruments, or the way these planning instruments can be implemented in a more optimal way to make this balancing a reality.
You can just speak up if possible. And if you can't unmute yourself, then please let me know in the chat and I can do that for you. Otherwise, Jovano raised a question, so I will unmute you and you can ask that question. Jovano.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yeah, Dr. Karina mentioned that in order to manage the landscape in the surrounding area of the new capital city. Oh yeah. Yeah, Dr. Karina mentioned that the tackling corruption and making our elected officials accountable is an important aspect in managing the landscape, especially in the surrounding area of the new capital city. What kind of suggestion would you give us to make this happen, make the accountability of the elected officials and make a better governance? Thank you.
Yes, Jovano, I think this is a very good and also interesting question, but also very challenging. I think that President Jokowi already made a big step in tackling corruption, but also governance can play a big role. Governors can play a big role, and you also have seen that probably in Sumatra, where local politicians were punished for corruption, especially in various land claims, etc. And I think also, if you look at the Indonesian population, I think we also always say that in the Netherlands, voting also counts. So to whom do you give your vote? And I think that tackling corruption always takes a very long time, especially if it has existed for a long time. So it also takes patience. But I think that voting is very important. So if you see that your government or your local government or politicians are corrupt, then next time vote for another government. Yeah, but I think this is a very challenging aspect.
Thank you very much, Karina, for answering the question. I hope this is an answer to the question, but I guess so. And I also noticed that no one really wants to add to the suggestions for the first question on the screen. So I propose to move on with the next question. So the survey results indicate that environmental change will be accelerated due to land use change. And that will lead to pollution. So how can pollution be managed and how can land use change be controlled? Are there any suggestions from the audience?
I don't see yet any question. Unless there is indeed a way to raise your digital hand, which I cannot find. If so, then I can unmute you.
Yes, Tiara raise hand.
Sorry, okay.
Tiara, if raise hand.
I don't see. Man.
You can just try to speak up.
Yeah, is that possible?
No,
Yes,
I cannot unmute
now.
myself, and also the chat is disabled right now.
Okay, okay.
Raising your hand function is under participants.
Okay. So.
This is maybe muted.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I think I have a more general question. No, actually, I don't. Actually, I think regarding the question you just asked, I think the only way to really manage any of this is to limit the influx of people to the new capital. Because as we all know, the pollution in Jakarta is pretty critical. And I really hope that they don't just move that issue to a new place.
So controlling the influx of people towards this new capital is indeed a very important mechanism to control land use change and to control pollution. Are there any other suggestions? No, not for now. Then I propose we move on to the next one. The survey results also indicate that until now, there is not so much attention towards reforestation. So what are practices from existing reforestation programs? What can we learn from that? Or what type of research would be needed to learn more and to know better how reforestation efforts can be strengthened, how they can be scaled up? Does anyone have a suggestion there?
I don't see raising hands. Neither I see any in the chat.
Well, people might be more inspired to discuss social issues. So maybe we can just continue. Verano, do you want to take over now?
Thank you, Pita. So in the social aspect, that the survey that we did, especially looked on food production. So similar question that we asked also to the respondent. Do you think the new capital will lead to more conversion like oil palm or timber or pulp, yeah, conversion to food. And from this results, you can see in the graph that oil palm and mostly the respondent is located highly agree or highly disagree is equal answer, not specific agreed about this question, but in the right hand related to self-sufficient for food production within the region. So this is likely respondent highly agree that this capital will increase food demand, yeah, for to supply for the capital. So this is one of the results that we can see. Next. Yeah. So, and then if you look at that in the social challenge that we also look at that what the positive or negative implication related to the social issue. So 30 respondent is concerned about the loss of traditional knowledge and culture. So I think this is 30% of the respondent mentioned that this is important to be considered, and also increase the migration and strong population growth. So it's mean that in one hand we have a traditional knowledge and culture in surrounding the area, but in other hand, the migration will be continue increase the population growth. Like in Jakarta, so we have a Betawi people, but now already in the suburb area. And also the others related to increase the social disparity and conflict if we are not managed well people. And also, but the other side also agreed that improvement for social issue will be happen there. So this is that based on the survey results that you can see from the pie graph. Next. So from this survey result indicate that self-sufficient food production within the region that you already saw the graph is very important. So based on this opinion, so what are the conditions for developing the sustainable food production within the region that we need to consider, yeah, to helping how to mitigate this happen, and what type research that we need to do or to complete the other plan that has been done by government itself. So this is to filling the gap, something that we have now right now about how to complete it, to provide food and etc. Maybe the supply chain, etc. So maybe any thought from the audience or participant, or would like to sharing your opinion, we would like to hear from your. So Mr. Hidayat to raise hand. So I will. Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
you are doing that, Bruno?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it
Okay.
clear?
So please.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. So before
Can you speak louder?
Okay, is it clear now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
better.
So my suggestion is diversification of food. So the research is related to that. You know, there was one research that I attended. It was like making tempeh with another what is it materials, besides soy. And I mean, in the long term, if the public or the people there accept it, it could be used as what is it as a mean to provide food for many people there. I believe the project to move the capital city to Kalimantan is a long-term program. So it will probably take a long time, and maybe in the first part they will still need what is it? Maybe food from other regions, to sustain themselves while improving their research and what is it project on food diversification. And it is also important to know that the place there, it might be different, in with the land in Java. So if we only plant rice, if we use if we plant rice everywhere there, it might be not be a good idea. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other contributions, questions, additions? Raise your digital hand, please. Okay, then I would propose to continue.
Okay. So the second from the survey result indicate that social change toward the potential loss of traditional knowledge and culture. This will be happen. Increase the social disparity and also conflict and improvement of social issue. So to address this concern, so how can we mitigate the negative impact of social change? In this time, to reduce the negative impact and increase the positive outcome in the relation to this, what type of social study would be needed. So I think for the second question related to the survey result, we invite for all of you to sharing your thoughts or idea about this, and maybe become an interesting topic for social science to try to address about this, because this is something new that in the recent period, that moving the capital from one place to new place in Indonesia context, I think a lot of things that we need to learn. So I open to the audience, please, to share your thought or idea about this or opinion.
You can do that by raising your digital hand again in the function. Anyone? No, not yet.
What about research into social capital that is already present in the region, that could serve as a kind of baseline. And then you could monitor the impacts on social capital. And another type of research could also look into ways in which social capital could be strengthened. Is there anyone who would like to react to that?
Yeah, Tiara F raise hands.
Yep.
Yes, could you maybe elaborate what you mean by social capital?
Social capital would mean the interactions between people. What are the relationships within communities, but also among communities? What are their livelihoods? How would their livelihoods change due to the establishment of new capital? And that relates both to the inhabitants of the new city, but also the inhabitants of the wider landscape.
So Tiara, the floor is yours.
I don't really have a reaction on that right now. However, I do have another question, a more general question to any of the speakers, really. How can we, I believe the reforestation itself is already a challenge in itself without moving a capital over there, without making a new city. How can these two ideas be married? How can we responsibly move a capital while there's still a challenge in itself already in the area?
That's a very good point. I think that's the key issue. And I'm afraid that 1 hour will not be enough to answer your question. What we try to do is to identify the main issues at stake in this session. And we also wanted to identify some directions for new research that would facilitate the collaboration between Indonesia and the Netherlands. And hopefully we can come up with an interesting research program focusing on these topics. So this session was meant to make a start with that kind of discussion, and we can use it to set up a kind of knowledge agenda. So what I propose is that we summarize the findings of this session, and we will send you a brief document that summarizes the issues we found based on the survey results, but also, of course, including the topics that were raised in this current discussion. Is there something you would like to discuss briefly, because we have 2 more minutes before this session ends?
Me personally,
at this
no.
stage? No?
No.
Then I want to thank NWO for hosting this session, and in particular Kustin for facilitating the session. Thank you very much. I want to thank Anita and Renee for organizing the session. It took you a lot of effort, especially because of this digital setting, and I think it went all very smoothly, so thank you very much for that.